Data-driven experiments. So the purpose that I see it for is really to increase confidence and de-risk innovation projects, which could be internal processes, your products or services, whatever it is that you're trying to create to achieve your business outcomes, right? So that's what I see is the purpose behind data-driven experiments. Because what typically happens is there's an idea, they build out the idea, they launch the idea, and now we have some data. The challenge with something like that is that it can take months to years, spend a lot of money, and there's just a high degree of failure with something like that. So instead, what I prefer to do with sprints and other experiments is to close the idea data gap. So we take only 4 days with our sprints, we spend a lot less money, and we're increasing the likelihood for success because we're getting feedback from the market early. And so this is a little gap that I like. And then as we're doing these type of things, I see that there's generally 3 types of experiments when going with this. So you've all heard of these: desirability, feasibility, and viability, right? Desirability is, do users want this? Do we have a clear pain? Do we know what their goals are? Are we providing a solution the way that they want the solution? And then feasibility, is this something we can do? Do we have the internal resources? No. Okay, is there someone who we could partner with that does? Our regulations, would they allow us to be able to do this at this point? And so on and so forth. And then for viability, is can we create the revenue? So we look at things like, what are the expenses? What's the cost of acquisition? What's the lifetime value of the customers? And so on and so forth. Personally, I think this becomes first, the desirability piece, because that's the thing that's at least in our control. And that's the thing that's way outside of our control that we can kind of anchor around. And once we have a good sense of that, then we got to figure out, okay, what are 20 different ways we could potentially solve this thing? And then once we know, okay, what direction do we want to even look at, then we can say, okay, well, what would that thing cost? Right, so this, to me, generally, that's the order that I like to do those things with companies. And the sprints that I do, they're mostly around the desirability piece. All right, so now when we're getting in the process of creating these data-driven experiments, the first piece is to get really, really clear about the business objectives and goals. I did not do that when I first started, and that was when they're like, oh, this is cute, this is sweet, but it didn't really get things anywhere. So coming and connecting with the business objectives and goals makes it a lot more likely that leadership will say yes to something like this, and you feel like you're having more impact. So you get aligned with it. So this is kind of the North Star, right? And you use this as kind of the frame of the experiment. And so some examples could be like increase market share by 10%, reduce churn. So if it's a subscription model, reduce churn by 5%, increase lifetime value of the customers by $300. And these are all ones that I've worked with different businesses on. So, okay, where does the business want to go? Let's be aligned and clear on that. So that's the first thing we're trying to do with the cross-functional team. Someone in sales, someone in marketing, someone in customer service. We're all getting clear. Boom, this is what we're focusing on. And so we'll all row in the same direction. Although is rowing, I think rowing's this way. I don't know, one of those ways. Once we have our North Star, then we look at what's going to get in our way. What's going to stop us from achieving our business objective? And I like to ask a particular question, very simple. Our team has failed to meet its long-term goal. What may have caused this? So now we're hearing from marketing, what could have caused this? We're hearing from customer service, what could have caused this? We're hearing from sales, what could have caused this? Hello, plants. We're hearing from the plants, what could have caused this, right? We're hearing from all the teams of what could have caused this, and then we're looking at which ones do we feel like are the most important to solve. So it could be marketing message isn't clear enough, our product doesn't meet current customers' needs, future regulations would force us to change our product. These are just some examples, again, with companies I've worked on where they're like, these things are going to kill us. So these are the things we need to figure out for first. And then there's I didn't put it in here, but there's a really great kind of matrix that I like to utilize for risk, where it's the severity of the risk and the likelihood of the risk. So we look at what's the thing that's going to hurt us the most and the most likely to happen. That's the one we want to focus on first. From there, now it's kind of going into the creation piece here. And so we're going to have the team go through a variety of exercises for inspiration, ideation, and turn them into concepts, each person creating like 1 to 3 concepts. So for inspiration, the thing that I like to do is an exercise called lightning demos. Anyone? I see you shaking your head. Okay. Lightning demos is, again, meant for the creative juices to flow. Right? If I ask you, think of innovative ideas right now, go, it can be really challenging for people. So instead, let's get them some support, add structure to help them think differently. So how this one works is pretty straightforward. We have them look at what are some other people and companies solving similar problems outside of their market. Outside of their market. So a really great simple example are surgeons. They're trying to redo their surgical tools to make it a lot more efficient for their procedures. A great place for them to look, hardware store. Outside of their world where they can see, oh, I like how they rearranged this and here's how they set that up. And so here's a couple of ones that are actually from clients. And this was for a product, a hygiene product company looking to create a non-product innovation, meaning they are looking maybe at services or technology or anything like that. So the first one we have is the phone service upgrade plan for Verizon. We have our Toyota trade-in program and our Domino's Pizza app. Just getting the juices flowing. And then we have what I like to call an art gallery, where we have all the lightning demos up so that we can really start thinking literally outside of the box, outside of our market, to try to get us to think with creativity. And then as you have that up, then we can go into the ideation phase. Inspiration before ideation. Nice exercise called 5 by 10, 5 ideas in 10 minutes. And with this, you can do, what I like to do is like have them do Frankenstein of different lightning demos and put them together, mix and mash, or they create their own. And so these were from a product that we are looking at, a mushroom-based product, an insulated product, edible product, a product that can be used 5 times because it was a single use, and a compostable product. So they're able to look at other markets and get these ideas. Then so everyone has their ideas, and you take one, you're like, I like this one. This one's nice. This one looks like it can really overcome the risks that we were talking about before. And then you kind of double click on it. Okay, you blow it up. What does this look like in a 3-point PowerPoint presentation? So now we're getting more details on it. So this is actually not any of the companies I worked with. This was from a book because I couldn't show those, but this is a really great example where it has visuals, it has descriptions, and we're just getting a sense of what this idea could entail. Okay, so 3-page concept. Now we start really nerding out, where we start looking into hypothesis. I know this is the one you're most excited for. I actually really love this part. So this is we don't make a decision on which concept we want to move yet. We just have the concepts in the back burner. But before that, we want to pick our hypothesis. And our hypothesis has 3 main components. And this is what I learned during grad school, during my research and behavioral science class, where in clinical psychology, we study people. So they make hypotheses. So how do we hypothesize with human behavior? So 3 main components to a hypothesis. The first one is an independent variable. What is the thing we are trying to test? So this is generally the prototype, right? The next piece is the dependent variable. So what is the outcome from the person who's going to look at the independent variable, at the prototype? Like, what are we trying to learn from them? What are we trying to see from them? And then the third piece is a measure. How do we measure that thing of the dependent variable? How do we measure their reaction? How do we measure their response? So these are the 3 pieces. Now we're going to go in a little bit deeper here. The order in which we do this is a little different from here. So first we pick the dependent variable because we're saying, what is the thing we want to learn from our clients, from our users, that we feel will get us closer to overcoming those risks to hit the goal. So we first pick the dependent variable. What are the things we're trying to learn? From there, we go into the independent variable. Then we go back to the concepts and look at, okay, using the dependent variable as the criteria, which one of these prototypes makes the most sense for us to learn what we're trying to learn? And then we go into measure. Then we say, okay, how do we measure that? So we're going to dive into each one of these just a little bit further. So for the dependent variable, again, what do we really want to learn from our users? So we can learn a whole bunch of things. There's so many dependent variables out there. So for example, do they find the solution reliable? Oh, I could trust this. Like this feels something that I can really rely on. Does the solution meet their current needs as opposed to their past needs? How valuable is this solution to them? Would they share this with a friend? Would they pay for this product? These are all things that we can try to learn from the users when we present the prototype. Right? And there's a whole bunch of these things. So it's really looking at, as a company, what do we think is the thing we want to learn? So for example, there was a paper product that I was working with, a company that sells paper products. A big one was reliability. That was a huge piece because if it was too flimsy, out of the way, but they don't also want to spend too much money on it. So where is the point that it feels reliable enough? Then the other piece is the measure. So there's basically two ways we can measure after we have our independent variable and a dependent variable. So self-reports and behaviors. Those are really the two main ways. Behaviors carry much more weight than self-reports. Self-reports carry much more weight than nothing. Okay. So self-reports, you've all seen some of these. So there's one called a Likert scale. So how much did they like something? You ask them the question, the user can measure it on a scale. This one you might not have heard of, semantic differential scale. What do they feel about a product? So you give them two opposing feelings with 7 dashes in between, valued from -3 to +3. So I'll show you what this all actually looks like. So Likert scale, this is the popular one. How appealing is it? 1 to 5. It's a 4. Woohoo. Semantic differential scale. How was it using the product? Was it really hard or was it really easy? And then they can say, oh, it's like that hard. And then we value those. So all the way to the left is -3. The center is 0. And then easy is +3. So now we're able to start collecting the numbers, the data for their response. Behaviors. So can we measure if a user does or does not do something? So for example, choosing a particular option on a clickable wireframe. We're really trying to increase the order value. So if we place things a certain way, are there going to be more clicking towards more value or less value, right? Or would they put a down payment for the product? It's not out yet, but you could put down 20% now and you'll get 20% off as well. Right? And then finally, purchasing the product. So maybe you manually create the product. You don't have it at scale, but you do have the products available. So you see if they purchase it or not. Right? As you can see, the evidence gets much more, the evidence strength increases as you go along, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. And then the hypothesis statement. So this is where you gather all of that and you put it together into one hypothesis statement. And so it's basically if X, which is our independent variable, then Y, which is our dependent variable and measure. So for example, if the product has a minimalist look, then users will rate the quality score 4.0 or higher. If the product has a strong feel, then users rate the reliability of the product 4.5 or higher. If the product has 24/7 customer service, then they will put a down payment for the product. So this is what we're trying to end up with. One statement, and we can say yes or no. We can get the data, we can get the numbers. It's very clear. In the past, when I started doing hypothesis, and I wasn't even thinking about doing it from the clinical psychology, and from other teams that I've worked with in other consulting agencies, their hypothesis was kind of loose. Maybe we hit it, maybe we didn't. You can kind of argue. This is just very straightforward. And then we have the outcomes. So the first round of your experiments it's going to be your base control. It's going to be your base measure, right? So this is now you're at the starting point after your first experiment. And then there's basically 3 different outcomes that we can get from an experiment. You all know this. You validate the hypothesis, so what we believe, the data shows what we believe to be true. You invalidate the hypothesis, it goes against what we believe to be true, and then more information is needed. So it's like 2 people pick this, 2 people pick that, one person didn't really pick anything, so now we need more data. But these are basically the 3 main outcomes that we can get after an experiment. And then these outcomes give us ideas of what to do next. So if we validate the hypothesis, one path is we can start dancing to the music. That's what you do once you validate, because you're stoked. You're like, we got this. We own it. No, it's perfect. I appreciate that. Was like perfect for validating the hypothesis. What do? You break out and dance. That's what you do. See, this is dumb. That was right. So we can take our experiment to the next level. What does that mean? Well, we can run another test, but go instead of 5 users to 50. Or we can increase the fidelity of the prototype, so going from a paper prototype to a clickable wireframe. Second path is we test the next important hypothesis. So we can say, okay, we tested the design, now let's take a peek at the strength and get some data on that. Right? So instead of increasing it, we're now kind of expanding out what we're trying to learn. Invalidate the hypothesis, you all know this, pivot. You could try something else. And there's kind of levels of pivoting. Something small like a new design, or something larger like going from a product or a service to a product. And then the second path is to completely kill the idea and start from the drawing board. So you're like, all right, we're going to help teachers. We're way off of that. That doesn't go with our capabilities. Let's look into helping nurses. And then you start all over. And then the last one, again, more information needed. Pretty straightforward, right? It wasn't clear if it worked or not. Run the same test, but with a new set of users. And you can also increase the number of users as well. Right? So the outcome of the experiments helps us get a sense of, okay, what next steps do we take on this map? So it's not like, oh my God, what do we do? It's pretty straightforward, like, well, this leads to that. And now kind of like putting all of that into a very succinct way of how do we increase our confidence. So there's basically 3 ways that we can increase our confidence. The first is with evidence strength. Customer interviews has less evidence strength than showing a prototype and asking for feedback, which has less evidence strength than people making a down payment, less than people purchasing the product at a single retail store, which is less than a regional test. Right? So we're increasing the evidence strength through the tests like that and through the ways that we're doing our prototyping. Drawing versus paper prototype versus a product from the actual mold. Second is increasing the number of people, right? 50 is more than 5. That maths. And then the last piece is increase the number of experiments. So we go from 3 experiments to 10. These are basically the main things that you can do to help you and your team start feeling more confident with the direction you're going, right? So, and you don't want to just do one of these. It's kind of like all of these. And you just kind of go up the ladder. And this is just a very simple example, but there's other ways as well. And then that's it, folks. So that's kind of the main idea here is first we have to work with our cross-functional teams, and then we can get the data. So a quick summary of everything that we put together is around remembering the complexity around group communication, right? It's a lot more complex than people give it credit for, which is why a lot of people hate meetings, right? So it's the gaps in the communication, the lines in communication. The challenges with the group communication, decision-making, the biases, there's so many out there. So if you ever feel like you want to get yourself a glass of champagne on a Saturday night and go crazy, you can just go and look at all these different biases that are out there. And then the process for inclusive and productive communication, the working together alone, the note and vote, and the time boxing. And again, there's others, but those are the ones I wanted to share. And then data-driven experiments. So align on the objectives, identify what's going to get in our way, get some inspiration, ideation, concepts, start creating the hypothesis, and then you continue to just increase the confidence. Evidence strength, number of people, and the number of experiments.